Oh, no, that's my account. Okay. Okay. I think we're ready. Okay, so good evening. My name is William Cordova, cultural practitioner and co-director at Under the Bridge Art Space, or UBAS, founded by artist director colodny.
Why do they have
Under the
lights
Bridge
on?
Art Space's house at somebody's.
You're not
Somebody's
muted. He's watching it. That's who's watching.
I'm sorry. Let me pause. Harold, can you turn off your? Can you mute yourself?
You don't want to listen to me?
Of course I do, honey, but time is money.
I am really upset about this.
Love you too. So, Under the Bridge Art Space, house at Bridge Red Studios complex in North Miami, was founded. Bridge Red was founded by and run by Kristen Tilley and Robert Tilley. Bridge Red is an art residency and exhibition space. I want to thank Kristen Tilley, Robert Tilley, and colodny for their guidance in supporting these Zoom programs. I also wanted to thank independent curator Amy Rosenblum-Martin for moderating the slide talk with Under the Bridge Art Space exhibition artists Rosemarie, Chiarlone, and Jessica Gispert. And let me hand it over now to Amy Rosenblum-Martin. Amy.
Hey, William, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here talking with Jessica and Rosemarie and all of you, lots of friends in the house. Hey, great to see your names here. So I think we should probably dive right into this slideshow, and this is going to be pretty informal, and I'm just curious to hear what the artists are going to say in response to my questions, really. But I'm going to start by showing you some slides so that we're all, you know, have the same visual references, and then we'll just talk about it. Go for it. William is going to share my slideshow. I'm going to start out by telling you about some of my recent projects, which a lot of you here probably already know about. So sorry if there's repetition. William.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about my projects for a minute and then show Jessica's artwork that's currently on view, Rosemarie's artwork that's currently on view, and then dive into some art historical references. That's the plan. Here we are. That's us right now. Next slide, please. Go ahead. This is my current project, Swagger and Tenderness, the South Bronx Portraits by John Ahern and Rigoberto Torres. And if you follow me on social media, you know a lot about this already. It's a show that's up at the Bronx. It's a big survey show. And it just got this nice review in the New Yorker. It's the first big survey show for work since 1992 when it was at CAM and in Houston. And it's like returning the Bronx portraits back to the Bronx. Next, here's some gallery views. Keep going. Yes, this was a recent project that you all know about, I'm sure, Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration by Dr. Nicole R. Fleetwood. She won MacArthur Genius Grant for this project. She wrote the book first, published by Harvard, and then she asked me to help her turn it into an exhibition, and Jessica actually was in this project at MoMA PS1. So this is just to give you a sense of the press. And this was another recent project, Ajani Okpu Egbe. You can read the longer title. At ISCP, keep going. It's like really super duper amazing activist work that you just, the paintings are and the installations are almost like fishing lures that pull people in. And then he has this incredible contextualizing video that tells about the situation in Amazonia, which has been blocked in international press, but it's sort of like a war on the scale of what's it called, Ukraine, but no one knows about it, and it's being waged by the French government there, but then US taxpayers, we pay into it without even knowing about it. Keep going. So his work just came out in this new coffee table book, which is awesome. Keep going. This is an older project from 2017, but it was really important to me to do this Ana Mendieta show at the Children's Museum in Harlem. That's my child a long time ago, dressed up like Ana Mendieta for Halloween. And it, it did well, and people were like, what, Ana Mendieta for kids, but the family loved that project, and so did the community, because it talks about Ana's work without referring to her death, which they're always really interested in. And this, of course, is William's amazing project that I was like thrilled to be a very small part of as one of many essayists. Greenwood Art Project. Keep going. I wrote about Sarah Ahmad's work. Amazing healing work. That's an image of her work on the upper left. And these are the, yeah. And then this work is an older show that I curated when I was a staff curator at the Bronx Museum, where, as you know, I'm working again. And I included this because it shows, my sort of historic engagement with geometric abstraction, which we're going to be talking about today. And this has Felix González Torres's work in the middle, Elio Oiticica's work on the right, and that small silver piece is a Lydia Clarkey piece, which actually I borrowed from Glaxis Novoa. So lots of overlap. Jessica's work that you all have on view at Bridge Red. Take a moment to read that. Hey. Beautiful, beautiful work. Okay, let's keep going. And then there are gallery views. I'm assuming you guys all saw this. I saw one person in our group from New York today. Hi, Paula. But everyone else, I think, is in Miami. I wish I could see this in person. This is a key one for us to discuss today. Beautiful. And this, I would point, can you go back 1 second? I just want to point out that this sort of quasi perforation in this piece, we're going to be referring to in a moment in our conversation. Keep going, please. Beautiful. And then Rosemarie has work on view as well. And I'll give you a moment to read this. Thank you, William. Super beautiful. There's that, and the last one is that perforation. The juxtaposition with the USA flag is certainly very telling here. Okay, so you all have a sense of what we're talking about. And I guess let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which is already our historical reference. When you say perforation, I think of this is like, I did a lot of work in graduate school about this work, and actually it's interesting that Lucio Fontana associated his poking holes with, he grew up in La Pampa in Argentina, and he saw people slaughtering cows as a kid, and it made a big impact on him. So that was one of the references. So I guess my first question is, but since both of you are using perforation in your work in different ways, are you thinking about slaughtering cows?
Rosemarie.
No, not at all, not at all.
Tell us a little bit about why perforation in your work, please.
Well, the work basically deals with absence, and connection, human connection, or the fragility of the human condition. So it's presence and absence. So the perforations create an image that is made up of absence because they're holes.
Beautiful. And Lucio Fontana also talked about like a view into the absolute, or into the, beyond, into the universe, so to speak. I'm probably getting the terminology wrong. I haven't studied it for a while, but
I particularly like the pink piece. Is that clay?
No, it's a painted canvas.
Nice.
Yep. And actually, William, will you go to the next slide before Jessica responds? And I want to give people a chance to read this before you respond. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I think for me it's interesting to read about Zarina's work, because for me it's about leaving a trace as well. In the material, I don't use paper in these cases, but in the brass piece that you saw before, there are markings that are left behind, but actually something opposite is happening. So the piece is etched in acid. And
Can
so
you go back to it actually, William, please? Sorry to interrupt you, Jessica.
sure, no, I think that's great.
Thank
So
you.
on this piece, the knife on the left that I designed has these circle dot pieces which are referencing hurricane patterns, and the dots were markings that were sort of gripping and holding on, because in the process of etching, the way the materiality works is that you use a mask, so in this case a marker, to sort of make to mark the space that you want to stay, and then the acid etches away the rest of the metal. So rather than my marking being the perforation, the acid sort of does that. And I more so think about making markings in that sense, and etching, like as well as I've etched by hand the machete piece that you saw earlier on the wall.
I mean, it's interesting because you're talking about like the absence of your hand in the process, and Rosemarie, you're talking about the absence of material, the absence of paper. So there's like a letting go of control to some extent. I don't know if that resonates with you guys.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, certainly.
Also, Jessica, because you're also with your William, can you find one of the pieces with holes in it from the wax, with the wax and the candles? Because also you're doing something similar by letting the fire burn holes in the wax, no, Jessica?
Totally. So there's probably not a close-up photo there, but this larger, all of the wax pieces, but more so prevalent in the larger orange and purple toned piece on the right. There's many wicks. It's made of wax, and there are wicks embedded in the wax that were turned on, set on fire, basically during the exhibition's opening, and will happen again tomorrow at the exhibition's closing. And yes, they do leave behind these sort of holes, these burn marks, which then, yeah, I see how that fits.
So is that just like a formal thing for you, or do the holes represent something beyond the formal shapes that they create? They are.
Oh, I mean, yes, they do sort of set this formal geometric sort of pattern in there, but the holes signify an absence, or more so a letting go, the same way you would light a candle in a spiritual sense to set an intention. And when the candle is evaporated and gone, the intention is supposed to be set. So those are markers of those intentions, traces of them.
So it's like such a personal thing, or you're communing with spirit in that way that you're talking about now, but yet it's in a public space.
Right. Well, the public part is that it engaged community. So every time a candle was lit, it was with someone's intention set into it. So that's where the viewer also is activated into the piece.
How about you, Rosemarie? Is your process personal? Do you just do it in your studio, or is there some public engagement?
I've been just doing it in my studio by myself.
And is there anything like an intention, or is there something that's spiritual for you about it?
Well, the triangle itself, the shape is spiritual, and sometimes the text is spiritual. But the
Where's the
image,
text?
what it says, honor, and then it says reality. So it's actually, this is a book that I collaborated with a poet, Susan Weiner, and her poem says, honor reality, aloft with truth, patience, victory. So as you turn the pages, you have this, the triangle becomes smaller and smaller, you have less triangles, but then you have the red. And the red to me is like in a sense, it's analogous to a heart. Without, the blood of the heart, without a heart, you can't live. So it is spiritual in that sense. The text is spiritual.
Amazing. And so, William, let's go to the back to the references, please. Thank you. We saw those. What's the next one? Yeah, stop there. So then the triangle is so important in this series of works that you made, Rosemarie, that I wanted to bring in a triangle that I'm very used to working with. I'm smiling because my friend and colleague Paula, who's here from New York, has these references too, because we both worked at the Guggenheim. So the triangles in this painting, Composition 8, that we're looking at on the left by Kandinsky, this represents very early geometric abstraction in the history of white supremacist modernism. And it's interesting to me for a lot of reasons. I mean, Kandinsky had actually made even more abstract pieces before this, but then he really wanted to bring the whole world along with him. So he sort of backtracked to make this piece where it's also legible as a landscape painting with mountains and a sun and clouds and whatnot. And then I included a picture of our triangle spiral staircase that Frank Lloyd Wright designed that's in the Guggenheim, because Frank Lloyd Wright sort of took this painting and made a 3D labyrinth out of it. And that's sort of one of the ways that the Guggenheim design came to be, which is pretty interesting to, walk through the building and look at this painting as like a
Really beautiful.
Yeah. And on the lower right, we have Buckminster Fuller. And as we were having a preparatory conversation for this talk with William, and William was saying, the triangle is also so important because it's the strongest form structurally, right? So that was sort of what Buckminster Fuller was famous for sharing with the art world, for sure, right? But you said that the triangle itself is spiritual for you, and I'd love to hear more about that, Rosemarie.
Well, for example, in the book, when you first see the cover of the book or the first page of the book, the triangle is facing upwards, like towards the heavens. And so for me, in that sense, it's very spiritual. But the symbolism of a triangle is perfection, unity, and importance. And I think
According to
think that
whom? Is that a quote of somebody?
that's a quote from I think symbolism from Wiki. Okay, so I think it is. I think it depends. And then on the flag, the triangle's resting on its side, going in the direction of the
Can
horizontal.
you go back to the flag, please? Thank you, William.
And it's going in the direction of the wind, and as it flaps, so it is spiritual because the wind is taking it up, and it basically it's entitled, the flag is called Truth, so it's the same thing as the book, but without the textual component.
That's amazing. So, and another thing that I'm hearing here is you're talking about the wind is spiritual, and we were seeing the fire in your work, Jessica. So there are these elemental things. Is there also water and earth anywhere in this show or two shows?
Well, if you look at the triangle and you see how what would I say, the shifting triangles, it could be a psychological shift. It could also be an environmental shift that someone is, undertaking or experiencing. That's how I view it.
Can you say a little bit more about that? The
Well,
environmental shift, how is it an environmental shift?
well, in other words, it is the physical and the psychological, the state of being,
That's what it represents for you to have the shifting triangles with the
Yes.
black lines. Okay. What about I'm really curious about the environmental piece. How is it environmental to you?
Oh, this piece? Well, in the sense that it's in juxtaposition with the American flag, and I love the wires and the birds. I just think the whole thing works together, and the two flags are in dialogue with one another. So the
Sure.
perception is up to the viewer as to what to derive of it. But the wires are communications. They're giving us information, whatever information we're receptible, that we want to receive or
Okay,
gather
perfect.
from it.
Thank
And
you.
also perhaps environmental in the sense that it's open to the public in our community.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. In juxtaposition also somehow with this American flag. So I think that's also really amazing.
Jessica, do you want to talk a little bit about water and perhaps earth too?
Sure. I guess water's always been very important to me. I mean, being from a Caribbean background and growing up here in South Florida, and throughout time, always realizing I've lived in many different places, but it's never felt right unless there's a body of water. I lived always near big rivers when I was in Germany by the Rhine. And it's a place of refuge and a place of cleansing and a place of ritual. And water in particular in this exhibition, as you have up on the screen, is in the sense of offering. And for me, and offerings, spiritual offerings that I grew up observing, which I think many people can relate from Miami, is that the water glass is an offering to those who've passed, a sort of spiritual water quench for the passage through the afterlife. And so I'll note that in most all of my solo exhibitions, there's always some sort of moment of an offering that is not considered a formal art piece, but that is just there as a personal token. And in this exhibition is the first time I think it's presented as more than that. And that's the piece that you're looking at. It's in the space on a shelf, and one of my favorite water glasses that I happen to collect. And if you look at the other image of the water glasses on the floor, those are actual, like those are, not that they're not both offerings, but these are offerings to specific people who have passed within the last 2 years. And I guess that's one form of fluidity, spiritual fluidity that is present in the exhibition, as well as my affinity to water goddesses and references to that in other works in the show as well, and journeys to the ocean, and rituals at the ocean.
Great. William, can you show the one on the shelf again, please?
Yeah.
And when we were looking at this the other day, Rosemarie, you had a incredible reaction to this, and I wonder how you see this in relationship to your work.
Well, I think that the indentations on the glass are like the triangle and the flag. But I know the more I think about this piece, I love the fact that it's not a complete circle at the bottom, that it has an entrance. So it makes me think that, did you buy this or get this beautiful vessel with the intent for it to be an offering? Because it's just exquisite as an offering.
Actually, yes. I've been collecting these water glasses for the last couple of years at thrift stores, and in direct relation to memory of how I see a lot of spiritism altars that were formed, like my aunt keeps one. She's a priestess, and what always drew me to them is that in most cases, not in all cases, they're just all these different etchings and shapes and sizes, and have these particular details that you wonder if they'd work so well in a set, but they work so much better to me when
Alone,
they're alone,
separate,
you
yeah.
know, separate.
Yeah,
but
it's
then
very minimalistic and very to the point. Excellent.
yeah. And this one just seems so special. This one was alone that I found on its own. And
It's
if you
beautiful.
turn it around, it has those indentations two more times. So like
Oh, really?
around it, it's just not visible in this
Okay.
image.
So William, can you go back to the shot that shows how Rosemarie's work looks similar to this, please? Yeah, thank you. Let's go back to the references, please. Yeah, so I just wanted to give another moment to think about triangles for you. Monier is another artist whose work I got to know at the Guggenheim, who worked so beautifully with triangles and this mirror, which somehow relates, I guess, to the quality of the glass that you were just showing, Jessica. Let's keep going. Jessica, you made a circle, so I wonder if let's give everyone a chance to read this, and then I wonder if you have a response to that. This is a Kandinsky circle.
That last sentence is really great. Yeah, it's a portal. That's always how I viewed circles, and in the sense of infinity. But in these cases, and especially with the larger circular work, that you see other circular openings within it, is just sort of this idea of piercing through to another sort of plane or idea or emotion, just a portal to another place.
And interestingly, I happen to know that Kandinsky considered this blue circle to be a self-portrait of himself, and blue to him, because he had synesthesia, sounded like a cello, the sound of a cello. So it's all of this combined with that sound represents him. Let's keep going. So then I just wanted to address, since I knew that we were talking about spiritual stuff, that I guess this talk is like a reaction to my work at the Guggenheim. I didn't really realize that until now. But so, you know, Kandinsky's famous for writing on the spiritual and art, among other things. And then the Guggenheim came out with this huge Hilma af Klint solo show, which was wonderful. I actually share a birthday with her, and I identify with her in several ways. And you know, it was like, oh, it's amazing because Kandinsky wasn't the first person to make geometric or to make abstraction and talk about it in spiritual terms. It was actually Hilma af Klint. That then, let's see the beginning of the next video. I can't hear it.
Oh, William, unmute yourself.
Let me know if you can hear it.
Like this in the whole world. We leap into
There
full
you go. Just start it
non-objective
again, please.
abstraction.
Thank you, William. You got it.
It goes beyond the visual. She was courageous in so many ways.
What's astounding is her bravery. There was nothing being made like this in the whole world. We leap into full non-objective abstraction. That just turned things on its head.
Okay, let's stop there. So there's this whole, you know, narrative in white supremacist modernism that like abstract art is sort of the ground zero, right? Or it's sort of, there's the whittling down to you know, suprematism or Kandinsky's work or even Mondrian's work, and then postmodernism is built on top of that, right? So, and so there's all of this sort of infighting among art historians, modernist art historians, about, well, who made geometric abstraction first, right? But to me, this is always such a moot point. It's so weird and white supremacist and embarrassing because everywhere on earth, people of all colors from the beginning of time in indigenous practices, just connection to the earth, have made things like this, have made abstraction. This is actually a petroglyph, an ancient petroglyph from Cuba. And abstraction belongs to everybody. So it took white art historians a really, you know, long time to get to be talking about abstract art, but it always existed. So obviously, you know, just to state what is very clear. Yeah, let's keep moving here. So here is an artist who William brought to my attention. She had a solo show at the Met not too long ago. And William says, Mohammedi interprets the landscape through abstraction. And this piece sort of reminded me of your works, Jessica, with leaves in it. I don't know if that's true for you too. Do you see any connection there?
Leaves, so more so in my use of the Royal Poinciana. Yeah, I mean, yes, in the sense of landscape and abstraction, I think that there's definitely a correlation there, particularly in the wax piece, which is actually titled In My Caribbean Landscape, which is based on memory and an abstracted form of memory of what the Caribbean is supposed to look like. Growing up here and not having visited the Caribbean in formative years, and only seeing it through, for example, a lot of Cuban landscape painting that features the Royal Poinciana tree as this flamboyant you know, vibrant sort of symbol for landscapes. And yeah, I could see that.
Let's go to the next slide, please. So then these, next one, back one. Yeah, thanks. So on the top left and the bottom right are the same artist's abstractions. And I'm going to let you read this text, and the Le Corbusier reference at the end is illustrated on the bottom left. But go ahead and read it. So I thank you, William, for bringing her work into this conversation. And I think it relates super closely to your work, Rosemarie.
Yeah,
You have
she had,
responses to
where
these
she has the,
visuals?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You
I
have
apologize.
responses to these visuals.
Yes, where she has the ink on paper, I see my perforations or my cuts,
Hmm.
you know, and that the fact that I perforate bi-directional, like from underneath, from the back of the paper and from the front of the paper, it gives that the shadowy effect that she has, especially in the left-hand corner, the image in the left-hand corner.
I wonder, I know that William, you want to be in the background, but would you like to chime in for a moment here and talk about why this artist is so important to you in this conversation? Putting you on the spot.
I'm sorry.
Would you like to say why this artist is so important to you in this conversation?
Just briefly, I think the artist's work, Nasreen Mohammedi's work, when it started to be illuminated in the mainstream, it debunked a lot of assumptions of in modernist art and contemporary art that a non-Western artist was making this type of work during the infancy stage of this, I guess, academic investigations of modernism and well, as a male-dominated also conversation, and this also personally is in conversation with Andean architecture, with Andean themes of landscape, of abstraction, of cultural encoding, that are not something that's talked about when people talk about Donald Judd or Frank Lloyd Wright, or even Jean-Michel Basquiat, about the geometry, the sacred geometries, about spirituality, that are not disassociated. Whereas I guess in a Western context, they're all secular. There's no spirituality, or the spirituality is taken away. There's a lot of exclusion in those conversations. But in non-Western, it's always, but in non-Western, it's always, not always, but it's usually go hand in hand. So those are the things that attracted me, because Nasreen's work is now, it has to be addressed in both ways. There's a duality to it. Even though Frank Lloyd Wright's work has a duality to it, it's not spoken about that way. Or Basquiat's work. Most people talk about his Ray-Bans or his Armani suits, and not Santeria or voodoo. So those are, to me, are the most interesting parts. It's like talking about Gandhi while ignoring Bhagat Singh's contributions. You can't have one without the other.
Hmm.
So, okay, I'll shut up now.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so
No.
much. So to take off from there, I'm wondering about your processes when you're working on making your art. Do you tap into your intuition at all?
You're speaking to me.
Sure. Mhm.
Um, I never work with a plan, so it is very intuitive. You know, if I collaborate with Susan, I have a text, that's the plan. But even if I have my own textual component or elements, it's very intuitive. Everything is very fluid.
So what is intuition for you, Rosemarie?
It's basically, I have a concept of what I want to do. I know, but I don't have a structure, so to speak. I just kind of go with the flow. I hate to say that, but I play with elements and move them around, and then the perforations, whatever I do within the textual thing, it just goes from one letter or one image to the next. But I can't map it out with a pencil first. You know, like the design element of it.
You just know when it's right,
Yeah. And I just, from the one line goes the next line, and it's just intuitive. And
And
when
you
I'm,
said flow and there's this concept of making things, to make things, ideally we're in a flow state. I wonder if that speaks to your process, Jessica.
Yes. There are parts of my practice that are very organized for practical reasons in construction. And I think the most flowing sort of, dare I say, meditative part is probably drawing in my practice, as something where the hand sort of goes and just creates and intuitively kind of works to make a image, whether it's non-objective or figurative. But intuition in general has always driven my practice. It's probably the magic in the practice, that kind of unexplicable gut feeling of what you must do in the studio or when ideas come up. And sometimes also with materials, like I love challenging myself to use materials I've never used before for this exhibition, wax being one of them. And just sort of intuitively working with those things also through trial and error and just what feels right or what ends up happening.
I mean, you're talking also about communicating with your ancestors and giving them offerings. And I wonder, do your ancestors have anything to do with your intuition?
I like to think so.
How about you, Rosemarie?
yeah, I think where you come from, is who you are. And it affects everything that you do.
Absolutely.
So intuition is like tapping into invisible forces, or no?
Unexplicable.
Inexplicable forces.
Yeah.
I think they're explicable to some people, maybe not to everybody.
Perhaps. I guess that's in the eye of the beholder, and sometimes it's kind of like appreciating the power of the unexplicable as that, like sometimes just staying in that position of not going further.
I mean, it's interesting what goes unsaid in your work, what you leave unsaid. What do you, I mean, is it fair to ask what you leave unsaid on purpose and why? Or maybe you want to leave that silent. I don't know.
It's interesting. I mean, I think that in the last few years, those things that used to be unsaid are more and more described in my work. Whereas a viewer might come and not maybe see those spiritual references at first, but those are the things that were unsaid. As my relation, like this work is a lot about my relationship to spirituality, as something that's always been silent in my life, and being surrounded by it and being a bystander to it. And I think that those are some of the unsaid things in that work.
Is there like a coming out as with this work in terms of you're showing the world that this is important to you?
Yeah, but showing the world that it's important, that experiencing these sort of spiritual parts is also very much rooted to where you come from. And so how that is just the fabric of where I come from, spirituality is the fabric, I think, of Latin America, whether in small private ways or larger ones. And it's not, it's not what you might find in theory courses
Yeah,
at school.
I mean, we're gonna have to go there at some point soon because it's in so much artwork. Rosemarie, is there something that goes unsaid in your artwork on purpose that you feel okay about divulging here?
Well, I think that I divulge it in the sense that my textual elements are so abstracted and they're meant really to be hard to read, because I want to force the viewer to look at another layer if they wish, but if they don't wish to, that's fine. So I like to tap into the seen unseen. I want that to be very apparent. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because you can either read it, I mean, it depends on we all have different sort of cocktails of different kinds of intelligence, right? Each person
Right.
might have a strength in verbal intelligence, and then they'll really see the words in your work, or someone might have a more, kinesthetic intelligence, in which case perhaps they're like feeling, in their mind's eye, they're feeling their way through the bumps in your work, right? And all these other kinds of intelligence. Someone with, natural intelligence that's tapped into nature is going to see the flag blowing in the wind and get a lot of information out of that. For example, oh, we're good. William, let's go back up to where we were. Yeah. I had pulled together these fire images. Can you go back to the fire images, please? Oh, the other way. Sorry. At the end of the references. Yep. Stop. No, up. There you go. Yeah, sorry, I didn't address it while you had it on the screen. My apologies. I just pulled it together some quick fire references, since Jessica, in your work, the fire really stands out to me, and I wonder if you want to talk about the element of fire.
Yeah. The element of fire in these pieces quite literally is to destroy them but in a way, sort of in that process, in that ritual process of lighting a candle, the intention is to let it melt and evaporate and kind of dissolve into the environment, into the unknown as well. So fire plays sort of that role in those pieces, also as an ephemeral component of the work. And what I haven't mentioned is that in these wax pieces are lots of materials that are embedded inside of them, particularly in the larger circular one. it's all the materials you would find in a healing ritual. So cinnamon bark and ruda, lime and lemon peel, salt. And fire plays a role in releasing the point of healing in that piece, because it's a sort of totem or offering to that sentiment.
And what about you, Rosemarie? I think you had some responses to these images as well.
Well, for the Silda Morales piece on the left, I think it's a beautiful piece. I mean, it's very monochromatic, like a lot of my work. And it has that textural component on the floor, but the subtle shape of the square and the projection of the side walls, I think is quite beautiful. The juxtaposition of the texture on the bottom to the smoothness of the other part of the white is magnificent.
I can imagine taking off my shoes and walking into one of your drawings.
Well, the thing
I
is,
tend to think about things kind of physically, so maybe that's
well,
just,
that's another reason why I do book art in the sense is because I think I like the tactile, that you can actually touch it. And I think that's part of it.
I'm realizing that I did not I wanted to say that whoever's listening in is welcome to write questions. My bad, I didn't say that. But I would love to hear any responses or questions from whoever's here with us. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Can we close the presentation page?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. It's good to see who's here.
Oh yeah.
Which artwork stuck out to you guys? It's an interesting combination of these two artists work together. Eddie, are you going to say something to us?
Well, hello?
Hi.
Yes,
you can put
I
on
was,
your camera if you like.
oh, no, it's fine. What I was going to ask is that in reference to the triangles, I've always, I mean, I think this is pretty much something that in terms of form and shape and the symbolism, that's been going through with my mind, but I find it to be ubiquitous is the idea of the triangle. Purely on a, in terms of civilization across many cultures and parts of the world and its hierarchical, like language in terms of socially, how people tend to just subconsciously perceive it as a form of power as well, or how it's been adopted as a form of power in terms of hierarchy, go as far back as, just to be too literal, but like pyramids, and so yeah, my question to all the artists is, I know that was a conversation, but do you see it as a form of hierarchy, or it still maintains in terms of the triangle as a repeated aspect of it, especially how it's been archived through photography and its conversation that's having with obviously the American flag? I wanted to hear any, that aspect of hierarchy as a symbolic component and the language that's being used repeatedly, socially, and how we're conditioned to perceive the triangle, the pyramid, that kind of 3-point shape. Thank you.
But I don't think of it as hierarchy as much as strength and unity in a sense. No. Maybe religiously it could be hierarchy, the trilogy. But it still has strength, and it almost has, the shape to me has signifies a purpose.
A purpose?
Purpose, not but purpose, yes. Like a goal,
So that it's almost like an arrow pointing in a direction?
sort of, yeah. It has a mission. The mission is unity. It's honor, that kind of thing. I think of it as hierarchies so much.
Also symbolizes a group, not just a couple, but it's like when there's a third.
Mhm. Yes, yeah.
It involves a sort of larger conversation. And I guess in some ways, the triangle, and not directly in my work, but I guess I do have an affinity to corners. William mentioned the other day, and how they hold some sort of powerful architectural sort of symbolism too, not just in sturdiness of structure, but as a place for, spiritual sense too.
I'm glad that you brought up the corners issue, and you put the water offering in the corners, right?
Yeah. So in the architecture of the space at Under the Bridge, it's practically 3 rooms when you walk in, and so if you walk in toward the back right, this one room is split off sort of by different sort of cubbies or niches in the wall that are quite large. And there's one in the back that I think that all artists who've had shows there before, Victoria's show, I think she's here, I saw, she also addressed in a special way. There's something, it's like this small sort of cube corner space that I think just deserves some special attention, and I felt that that's where that offering definitely belonged.
In the corner, it creates a triangular space on the floor.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. Huh. It's almost like it's private. So
Paula in the comments asks, are the glasses holding water refilled during their time on display? If so, what determines the refilling?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Throughout the exhibition's time, it's been up since what, the 20th of November. Every time I visit the space, which is about every 1 or 2 weeks or so, I do have to refill the glasses, as they do symbolize water quenching the spirits. Spirits have been drinking, so I have to refill them. And we do live in Florida, where there's quite a hot climate. So yes, the water glasses are refilled as I would refill them on an altar.
And Victoria Ravelo, sorry, I don't know if you pronounce your name in English or Spanish, says, thank you. When I saw those glasses in the corner, I was instantly transported to my family's home altars. And Paula says, thank you for your response. I see a hand from Danny Kolker. Go ahead and.
Hi, speaking of Victoria's display and yours, Jessica, both seem to talk about spirituality from a Latin female background. And neither of them had, as far as I could tell, had labels.
Oh.
And yeah, and as you know, in exhibits, in shows, most shows have labels. And I was wondering if there's any connection, and if Victoria wants to talk about it too.
Yeah, no, I think maybe Danny, you came in a little later. I did sort of briefly addressed that earlier, where there was one piece that was labeled, which was the glass of water on a shelf in the exhibition, as a piece, as an offering, and then the ones on the floor as simply as what
I totally got that, and that's what made me think, okay, is that your MO for the entire show?
for the entire show. How do you mean?
Okay, well, the spiritualism in both shows was implicit rather than explicit, except, I mean, once in a while it was, but I'm wondering if that was intentional. Well, where you go to a museum show, and things like this are labeled, and there's curatorial labeling, or even the artist just labels, with the artist statement about the piece. And there were artist statements, but that's I'm because sometimes in both shows I totally misunderstood what was going on and was thrilled to understand what really was going on.
That's the ideal viewer. Yeah. I'd love to hear what Victoria, I didn't know that detail about Victoria's corner piece not being labeled. And if you also didn't label that, that's pretty cool. And I'd love to hear.
I'm not
more of
just
that.
talking about corner, I'm talking
Right.
about the entire sort of exhibition, the concept, and with Amy as a curator, what that, because to me, it wasn't just about your art. The way it was, both shows were presented seemed to follow a pattern of where you were engaged, you had to engage. It didn't necessarily, and as a non-Latin, non-female, a lot of these I had, once I had someone interpreted for me, I was like, overwhelmed, but on face value, I often didn't get much of anything.
Okay.
Okay, I want to jump in for a second, and I would like to address that, Danny. Thank you for asking. Victoria in the chat says, I got your name right, I'm glad. She said that she had labels or info for her work on a sheet near the entrance.
Yeah.
And I think that the question of labels or no labels is a great curatorial question. I know that I tend to favor less labels, less curatorial texts in an exhibition, because I feel like it's subtly suggesting to the viewers that whatever they get out of it is correct. They're not looking to me for interpretation. They can interpret themselves, but some people, because they're used to labels and curatorial interpretation, that makes them nervous. But
Right.
that's sort of it's a big debate in the curatorial world, and it has been forever, probably, or for a very long time. I think we need to wrap up, actually.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any burning last minute interjections?
And I just wanted to quickly clarify for Danny and everyone that there was a title list for pieces in the show. It's just that the glasses on the floor were intentionally untitled and kept out of that list.
William, would you like to add what you were suggesting to me? No? Okay.
No. You speak best. Much better.
Okay, I think what William was suggesting was that just the process of making repetitive perforations in Rosemarie's work is also sort of meditative, at least in our imagination of how that might feel to make. So there's a nice back and forth between your work in that way too. Hey, Donna.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, one quick question that came to mind was for Rosemarie.
Yes.
In Jessica's work, you can see that, her cultural lineage is very much a part of her language and is present in her work. But for Rosemarie, I wonder, how much do you want your cultural lineage to be present in your work? Is that an intention that you aim to achieve, or where do you stand on that?
Good question.
Great
You
question.
know, what I find is that I'm Italian. My grandparents came from Italy, and we lived in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia. And you know, there were struggles, you know, and things like that. And I think my feeling about my what would I say? My concepts relate to my family. Not so much that I'm Italian, but the way I was brought up and the things that you fight for that you think is right. As far as my material, I come from a family where they were sewers. You know, they sewed. My father was a labor worker, so we worked with our hands. And I do work with textile. I work with paper. I do some sculptures. That is very much a part of me. That's the things that I embrace. So I do embrace my heritage. But to hold the flag up to say I'm Italian, no. But it is in my concepts. Does that make sense to you?
And another thing, you know, as white people, I feel like we rarely are asked to represent our whole race or our whole nation, but like as Black and brown people or Latinx people, etc., I feel like it's good to remember that everyone, I feel like, is representing just their personal subjective experience of life just as much as we are, right? So
Yeah, and I think at
that's
different
true for
times it was,
Jessica.
yeah, it was very different. I mean, you couldn't get into this country unless you had a family member that could vouch for you, you know, and take you in. So it was a different kind of immigration process than what's going on today. And you know, there's always, you know, prejudice and, you know, issues. But
Okay,
it's
thank
interesting.
you.
Thank you. That was a good question, Donna. Thank you.
William, shall we wrap up?
Yes, I want to thank you all for this wonderful, thought-provoking program. And thank you, Amy Rosenblum-Martin, for taking the time to moderate this live talk. We also have a closing reception tomorrow, Sunday, from 12 to 3 p.m. with Jessica Gispert and Rosemarie Chiarlone at Under the Bridge Art Space. Please join us then, and also feel free to attend the ongoing exhibit curated by Robert Chambers, The Blueprint, at Bridge Red Studios. Lastly, please help control the animal population. Have your pet spayed or neutered.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
so much.
William. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Bye.
I'm gonna teleport there.
Please.